Hello, my creative friends. I've been kind of on a hydrangea kick lately. I did a mixed media version. I also did some on some cute little bunnies this weekend. You can find all of those videos on my channel, but tonight I thought I would show you an idea of how you can create them using watercolor. I'm going to be using them in this blue and purple. They also look really pretty in this light shade of green as well. I'm going to show you how I created them using a round brush. On this piece here, I used a filbert brush, just the filbert, but tonight I'm going to be showing you how you can use a round brush and use a square stroke to create these petals. I'm going to be working with the purplish blue colors. I like that color. I'm always going to start out light and bright when I do watercolor. So it's just the opposite of what I was doing with the acrylic paintings that I showed you. I started with a darker base and then built my lighter colors on top. This is watercolor, so I'm going to be starting light and then working my way dark. Usually hydrangeas have a roundish shape. They can be cone shaped. I do have some at my house that are more of a cone shape, but I'm going for a round shape for this. I'm first going to be blocking in some of the lighter shades. I'm going to load my brush and then I'm going to tip the tip and the belly of the brush down at the same time and push and pull it towards the middle. Turn my paper, do the same thing. Push down and then pull to the center. So I'm getting that square edge on the top and then it's turning to a point as I'm pulling it in. And that's how I'm going to create these petals. Now most hydrangeas usually have 4 petals, but it doesn't really matter. You're going to be layering on top of these petals. So you're going to start light, start with laying down some petal work, and then we're going to be applying the darker colors on top. Now remember, when you're doing watercolor, you definitely want to try to leave some white spots, open spots with this. So when you're laying it in, leave a little bit of white. That's going to be your brightest colors. It's a little bit more important to leave those open areas with watercolor and a little less important with acrylics. So you can see how I'm just kind of turning my paper, pushing and pulling. It does take a little bit of rhythm to do this. I'm working on Canson paper, which is fairly smooth. It's kind of a smooth paper. All watercolor papers have different textures in them, but that is one of the reasons why I like the Canson watercolor paper. It's a student grade, it's 140 pound, but it's a rather smooth paper. Some papers have a lot more bump into them and they're going to hold your colors differently because that texture underneath is going to affect what's happening on the top. So here you can kind of see how by pushing that point down and the belly down at the same time, it kind of scoops that little bit of paint to the center, which gives it kind of an interesting look for how the watercolor blends. I'm going to go a little bit fast forward here, speed this up. You're going to see how I'm keeping on building the piece. The flower kind of develops on its own. It kind of figures out where the center is. Mine ends up being kind of facing off to the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit and I'll show you how it progresses. I keep on turning my paper as I'm putting on my strokes, and then eventually my flower kind of goes off to the right-hand side. I add a little bit more darker color on the top by using less water to make those blooms a little darker on the very top. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch my colors to using some purple. I'm using that color violet and I'm mixing it a little bit with the blue that I already used, and I'm going to create this purple flower exactly the same way I did my blue one. As I'm developing this purple flower, I allow it to touch into my blue flower so it kind of melds together so it looks like kind of a pretty little bunch of flowers. Here I'm going in and adding a darker shade of purple on top. Remember, watercolor does dry lighter, so what you see what looks like when it's wet, it's going to be lighter than that as it dries. So I'm just tapping in those little areas. Then once my pieces get all the way dry, I'm going to be coming back in with my brush and creating some darker little centers for my flowers. Those little center marks really do give that feeling of that it is a hydrangea flower. Here I'm going in and laying in a little darker blue because some of my blues were all looking the same. So to add that little extra depth to my picture, I'm going to be popping in some darker blue colors. To create those center marks, I'm going to be picking up almost pure pigment, just a tiny bit of water on my brush. I want to keep those centers just very tight and not flowing all the way out. I want them to stay very prominent, so I'm using not very much water at all when I'm placing in my centers. I use a darker blue for the blue one, and then I take that purple and I add that to the purple ones as well. Now to mix up a little bit of green to add my leaves in. Because it's watercolor, I'm going to be adding my leaves second and not first. When I did my acrylic painting, I put the leaves on first because I could paint over them and you wouldn't see the leaves. But because this is watercolor and it's translucent art medium, I'm going to see what's underneath, so I want to make sure I put the leaves on the very last. Hydrangeas have a very kind of a bigger leaf. They have a point at the one end and then it comes out wider and a little rounder. They do have little jagged edges on them, but I don't put that much detail in my leaf. I just want to have just a general bit of green behind there, kind of a general shape, and just change them up from the different sizes is what I'm looking for. Usually when I do paint leaves, I like to have some groupings of 3 normally, and then I'm going to add some different variety of sizes. I also added a little bit of blue into my green just to change up my leaf coloration, just to give it a little bit of interest that way. And I took in some of that little blue-greenish paint that I had, and I just kind of spread it around in the back of my picture, just to add an interesting background quality to this picture. And I thought that looked nice. I think this would make a really pretty card. It would also look great inside of a frame. You can always take those pieces, chop them up smaller, and make a bookmark, and I think that looks great too. I also wanted to show you that you don't have to use watercolor paper to create these on, and you don't have to stick to just one color in your flower. Here I'm going to be mixing the blue and the purple at the same time. I'm also switched brushes. I'm using a filbert brush for this one. It works well too. It creates a pretty little top of the leaf. It is a different look. It's not as squared off. It has more of a rounded look to the petal. But I like the look of the colors mixed together, so you don't have to keep them separate there or only stick to one color. You can mix the colors together, and I really do like that purple and that blue colors together. Add the leaves the same way by having them out towards the outside and just mixing your colors together. I even mixed a little bit of the purple and the blue in my leaves, and I like that look too. I added the dark centers to the middle to make it look more like a hydrangea. And I did it the same way by adding a lot less water and more pigment and just creating those little dark centers here and there. I gave it a dry, and then I was going to be ripping my paper up and putting it on a paper tag. Another way to use these pretty little hydrangeas. A glue stick works pretty well to hold these papers down. They're fairly thin, so I went ahead and I used a glue stick and just stuck them on and put them off to the edge a little bit so that they weren't perfect, and then used my scissor and trimmed off the edge. I'm going to be adding a little bit of sketching on the top and a few other little pieces and making a cute little tag. I'm going to be using my stamp again, the one that has the illegible writing on there. I use this thing all the time. I've gotten my money's worth out of this particular stamp. Again, I had taken that stamp off the back of a wooden form, and it works great that way. Oh, and it does work better if you take the cap off your ink. Oh my goodness. I was wondering why it wasn't printing very well. It's because I had the cap on. Then I thought a little bit of hand doodling would be kind of cute. I'm just using a regular old ballpoint pen and creating some kind of, I don't know, just made up flowers, like a little bit of a Queen's End lace or something. They're just doodle flowers, and they look kind of cute on the very top. I still had the butterfly stamp that I had used in that coaster mixed media piece. I'll pop that video up for you to be able to watch if you would like to. It's a great little video, and they're really pretty, done in blue acrylic paint. I went ahead and I just put that little butterfly on the very top, and then it's time to do a little bit more inking around the edges. I love using that color Ground Espresso, so I use that around the edges. And then I have one of those little finger dauber things is what I think they're called, and that really works great because of the rounded edges on there to come in and add a little bit more of the color towards the middle. Those little rounded edges really make a difference when you're putting the ink on. I had some blue fabric that I had picked up at my thrift store, and that looked great on the very top. I just ripped it. Oops, here I'm gluing down some pieces that weren't all the way down. Oh, I did add some leaves in there too. I thought, why not add a few little scrabbles of the leaves down at the bottom. And again, this is just a regular old ballpoint pen. Use what you have. And here's that fabric I found at my thrift store. I always take a look to see what might be available at my thrift store when I go. I bought this whole bag of fabric for about $1.50, so it's always good to take a look to see what you might have. I wanted to mention I do have a sketchbook membership, and the link is down inside of the description box. That's where I host all of the line drawings for any of the paintings or drawings that I do on my channel. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Here's a couple more videos that you might want to watch if you enjoyed this one. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again. And next time you'll create right along with me.